Most people expect ministers to pray. In fact, most people expect pastors to be able to pray at the drop of a hat. Whether it be a blessing the biscuits, as my dad calls it, over a potluck supper, or offering a prayer of committal at the grave of a loved one, or over the last 34 years of my ministry, I've belonged to about 5 different Rotary clubs, and in each one of them, I ended up being the only pastor, and so I was the designated prayer for each of these. Add to this other special occasions, whether it be a soup supper or a smorgasbord, or any other events that happen on a regular basis, and people expect the pastor to pray. And that's why it's been really special to come to this church. Because every week I get prayed for. I don't know if you know it or not, but if you happen to get caught in the narthex just before we come into worship, we take a circle of anybody we can grab, and especially anybody involved in the worship service, although Nancy's up here playing the prelude usually. But we stand in a circle, we have a circle of prayer, and usually Ron does the praying over us. And any of you have ever had Ron pray for you, or heard Ron pray in public, he has a gift far beyond mine. He is a great designated prayer. They call it extemporary prayer, whatever you call it. But most people expect pastors to pray, and most people expect pastors to be good at it, which was certainly not my case when I came out of seminary, or at least when I was in seminary. I can remember early on, my first year in seminary, when I was serving a church near Hartford, Connecticut, and one of my jobs that they gave me was to go around and do the pastoral visits at the hospital, that often I would be very frightened of prayer. I hadn't done a lot of public prayer in my life. I would get near the close of the visit and I would wonder whether it was time to pray. I wondered where, how, and to whom to pray. And a decision would come. Should I just pray? Should I ask or just start? Should I turn down the TV? Should I ask the patient to turn down the TV? They won't always do it. Should I wait for the nurse to stop fiddling with the IV? Should I take into account that I've never seen this person in church before? What should I do with the 7 visitors who are standing around the person in the next bed telling dirty jokes? How do you pray then? Eventually it got easier. I got a little more confident. I even began to trust my feelings. I turned and learned to express and sense when it was comfortable and called for to pray. I learned to pray in the midst of distractions. I learned to say things like, I'd like to have a word of prayer with you. I also learned never to ask, do you want me to pray for you? Because I've had people say, no. Boy, is that awkward. Having conquered my fears of praying in public, though, I have a bigger fear now. I no longer worry that prayer is difficult, but rather that it's gotten too easy. It's possible to pray for someone and have it seem automatic and meaningless. You have a conversation with someone, sometimes it ends in prayer, other times you say as you walk out the door, I'll pray for you. And I will, that is, assuming I remember to, and I try to remember, I really do. And I wonder if people believe me when I say I'll pray for you. Or do they think it's just kind of a heavenly 10-4? I'm on my way. Going up another floor. Let's face it, all of us say things that are automatic just to finish a conversation or begin one. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a group and I was talking among several of them, and one other person walked into that group and I said, "How are you?" And then I kept talking to the people in the circle around me. About 5-10 minutes later, after the person had made a cup of coffee and sat down in the group, he said, "Do you really want to know?" To which I said, "What?" He says, "You asked me how I was." To which I thought, I did. And I said, "Yes, I really do want to know." But sometimes it gets so automatic. You say, "How are you?" He'll say, "Fine." And it doesn't mean they really are. I hope my promise to pray for someone will never become as mechanical as that. I hope that I'll always mean it and remember to. The scripture Jack just read to us in the Sermon on the Mount makes it clear that we ought to pray with and for people. Why? As usual, I got 3 points. I could think of at least 3 benefits. The first benefit of praying with others is because prayer can take you out of your narrow interests. It expands your world. This is true of the very simplest prayer. God bless Mommy, God bless Daddy, God bless my grandparents, God bless my little turtle friend, my pet turtle Tommy, and I guess while you're at it, God, you can pray for my little bratty brother as well. To pray for someone is to recognize that you're not alone in the world. We are a mixture of relationships, and when we pray, we show we care. And once we've shown that we care, we're part way along to taking part in healing that other person simply by sharing our power and God's power with their power. To pray that God will bless someone is to open yourself to being a channel of that blessing. Second benefit of praying for others is that you become a part of all the things you pray for in this life. And they become a part of yours. I'm serious. Try it. Go home and pray for someone by name. Pray for them for 7 straight days. See if you don't begin to have a stake in that person's life. An investment to the degree that you find that it's a growing concern how they really are. If you pray for someone long enough, you'll find that you've given a precious moment of your time, but you'll also have allowed them to have a claim on your life. Prayer is expansive, and when you pray for someone, you become part of a network of strength from which they can draw on healing waters. Encourage in ways you never imagined. Third benefit of praying for others is that such prayers can be marvelous in healing broken relationships. Healing broken relationships. Jesus knew this. Matthew 5:43, he calls us to pray for others, even our enemies. You have heard it said, he said that you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. But add to this challenge Jesus' part where he talks about praying for your enemies. Surely you have at least one enemy. If you progress this far in life without having any enemies, you're either marvelously saintly or you're incredibly dull. Anybody who lives a life of vitality and energy is going to make an enemy or two. It's going to happen. Pray for one of your enemies. Jesus said you have to. pray for those who persecute you, and then pray for those that you're persecuting. There's some there too. In fact, there's generally more of the latter than there are of the former, if you're really honest. But be very careful here. Don't be too quick to tell your enemy that you're praying for him or her. Your rapid announcement that may simply seem to them as an attempt to get the upper hand in the argument. Sometimes when people get really upset with me, they say, "I'll pray for you, Pastor." Sometimes, though, this really sounds to me like they're going to go home and get God and drag God into the argument, on their side, of course. It's like, heavenly, my daddy's bigger than your daddy. Their promise to pray for me delivered in the midst of a fight or an argument sounds kind of like a threat. Sometimes makes me feel rather daddy-less. I believe Jesus recognized this danger. That's why he suggested praying in private. In our scripture lesson from Matthew 6, Jesus says, whenever you pray, go into your closet and close the door and pray so that your Father who sees what is in private will reward you in private. One more caution. During prayer time each week in church, as we just did, and I ask for persons who need special prayer, when you offer prayer for someone else during public prayer in church, please be sure that person wants to be prayed for publicly. It's important. Sometimes bringing something up in public which a person wants kept private can be a betrayal of trust. In fact, it can be a lot like gossip. So, there's a simple sentence you can do. You can just ask somebody, is it okay if I share with others and with the church your needs? Or can I share just an unspoken need and not a specific need? Sometimes prayer can be frustrating. I've had folks tell me that they've prayed for something over and over and over and it's not come about. At times doubt sets in. Begin to wonder if anybody's listening. I was thinking, while Shara was doing the children's sermon of one I did many, many years ago where I brought a toy telephone into church and I set it down on the steps and I did a children's sermon and I told them that praying to God is a lot like talking to God on the phone. And one little girl immediately picked up the phone and she went, "Hello, God." There's nobody listening, she told me. She's right. And sometimes prayer can seem like that. We can go, "Hello, God," again and again, and it can still seem like no one's listening. Some of us, when we don't get an answer, we stop praying. We assume there's no one at home. Jesus recognized this. He asked us to pray persistently, not because God doesn't hear us, but because he wants to hear us and he wants to be near us. He wants us to focus our minds, our hearts solely on him. The greatest prayer is not the prayer that brings us things, but the prayer that brings us the presence of God into our lives. This may be difficult to hear, but I think we've spent far too much time asking for things when what God really wants to give us is himself, his courage, his patience, and faith in him. John Wesley, said the greatest thing that God can give us through prayer is assurance. In our scripture from Matthew 7, Jesus promises all three things by saying, "Ask and it will be given to you, knock, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened unto you. For anyone who asks, receives, he who seeks, finds, and to him who knocks, it'll be opened. When you pray, know that God is listening. Believe that the Creator of life is the Lord of all people. Believe that God of humanity is Lord of all of our relationships. Believe that God's not indifferent to anything that you pray for. Believe that He cares as much as you do and even more. Believe that when you pray for someone by name, you're not so much awakening God's attention or giving Him some news about someone He's never thought about previously. You're simply tying into God who's already part of that person's life. It's naming someone who's already on God's heart and close to His lips. That's what Matthew 6:8 says when it says, your Father knows what you need even before you ask Him. If you believe in the power of prayer, I guarantee you can work a miracle. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in the 12 months I've been your pastor. I've seen it happen over 34 years as a pastor. I've seen it happen over 58 years of life. People say I felt I was being upheld in prayer, and they testify to that fact. And I believe that people are upheld by prayer. I believe without prayer they might not hold up as well. I believe they might fold up without prayer, or even fall down. And if the whole church prays for something and someone, I think that the success has nothing to do with the fact that God listens better to groups than individuals. Instead, I think it has to do, and by the way, that's bad theology. I think it has everything to do with the multiplication of spiritual energy that comes as a result of so many different wills, all in a group, blended together with God's will, and multiplying out to an amount you can't even imagine. So in closing, I want to confess something about my understanding of prayer and the importance of prayer. There was a time in the early days of my ministry when I would have said everything I said to you this morning and not understood much of it. My language would have given me away. I can remember closing with persons and saying, of course I'll pray for you. It's the least I can do. Think about it. Think of the implication of that. Of course I'll pray for you. It's the least I can do. I was describing prayer as the least thing I could do for a person in need. But now I'm so completely in awe of what prayer can do, I've come to believe, my friends, that prayer is not the least I can do, but it is the very most I can do for